Last week we were in the book of Amos, and I was explaining to you how the book was focusing on the end days of Israel, because Israel was not listening to the Lord, had turned away from the Lord, and had basically the Lord was calling and calling and calling and calling, and the people were not listening until finally the Lord says, nothing more I can do. Now, I wanted to separate that from giving up. It wasn't that the Lord was giving up on Israel, because obviously we see Israel's restored, but it's an important message so that people don't believe that the Lord will give up on them. You may be dealing with some of the most discouraging people in your life. I'm just, not that I have anyone like this, but I'm just saying this in general. And you may say, there's no hope for them, and you may be ready to give up on them, but God never is. And so that's the distinction I want to make. Well, now we're in Isaiah, and we talked about Isaiah yesterday. We're continuing in Isaiah, and this is a passage that's fascinating because we go in this passage, we're in chapter 7, 1 through 9. Well, if you do your research, look up 7:10, and what you're going to see in there. The virgin will be with child. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, some versions, including the New American Bible Revised Edition, say the young woman will be with child. Please give me a break. The virgin will be with child, and she will have a son and name him Emmanuel. That becomes the ultimate Christmas message. That's that powerful message. Well, that's the next verse from the verses we have here. We're not going to read it tomorrow. We're going to go into a totally different chapter tomorrow. But still, from the section, and this is from a book in Isaiah. It's from the book of Isaiah, but a section of the book of Isaiah, which is called the Book of Emmanuel. I believe, and let me just look that up. I believe it's chapters, it is. It's chapters 6 through 12, actually to 12, verse 6. That's called the Book of Emmanuel, and these are the prophecies about the coming of the Lord. But what we're looking at here, that's the way we understand them today. They may not have understood them the same way, obviously, because they're living in this time. If you've read my homily over at catholicaudimedia.substack.com, I remind people that we are not created, we are witnessing creation. Creation is ongoing. That's what St. Paul was preaching, that it's ongoing until its ultimate culmination, which we see in the return of the Lord at the second level of the fullness of time. So creation is ongoing at this point, so we're witnessing creation ongoing, and therefore we recognize all that. Well, one of the things we see in the book of Emmanuel is preparation for the first level of the fullness of time, when the Lord will be with us. But the people at that time can't fully understand it, but we can look back and say there was the message there. Just as we can understand from the messages that we look back upon, oh, look, like one of the things I've said to you quite often is the concept of evolution. And I said, those people who don't believe in evolution don't believe in biological evolution. But clearly, even if you don't believe in biological evolution, obviously there's other forms of evolution. There's technological, there's cultural, there's language, everything. There's just anthropological, everything else. So we see a level of evolution, but you cannot witness it happening. You have to look back and see it. And so it is here that you may have these messages of the coming of Emmanuel, but they obviously wouldn't have understood it fully until when we can look back and we say, oh, look, there was the message right there. There was the whole message all along. And we can see that. So what's happening is you've got Ahaz, and he is the king of Judah. And Isaiah, speaking for the Lord, is going to speak to Ahaz. And Ahaz is afraid because there are these other kingdoms that are joining forces to fight against Assyria. And Isaiah tells Ahaz not to. And he gets the message from Isaiah, which we see is trust in the Lord. And that's where we see that these other nations that will trust in themselves and work out a alliance to fight against Assyria, they will fail. But he's telling Ahaz to trust in the Lord. And that's the powerful thing, that when, things are going really wrong, and let's face it, I deal with people, including in my own life, where things go really wrong. And you need to trust in the Lord. And that one of the hardest things I can do is encourage people to do that. I wrote in I think it was my second book. I don't even know that's still on sale, but my second book, I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, I wrote in my second book, back when I had nothing else to do, and I was writing my second book. Sorry, I just had to throw that in. That if someone comes to the door, but they don't believe in God, there's virtually nothing I can do for them. And there's a truth to that. You might say, well, you can help them out somehow. You can help them out a little. You can help them out. You can, but there isn't a lot you can do because, if they're looking for money or they're looking for food or something, okay, you can do that. But you can't give them any hope because they don't have that connection with the Lord. And that's something I find really frustrating. And a couple of times I've had to deal with people who I've basically said, no more. There's nothing I can do. You come here, you don't believe in God, you're looking for money, you keep looking for money, but you don't believe in God, and you come to the church and you don't believe in God. And it's not that I don't want to do anything for you, but there's what you're looking for is more than I can do. And it really is something I can only do if you are a person of prayer. And that's one of the things that I deal with, because you have someone who maybe is coming here coming looking for money, and I don't have any money to give them. And then what else do I have? It's kind of like that scene from St. Peter, where he said, I have no money to give to the cripple at the pool of, I think it was the pool of Bethsaida. And, but he says, here's what I can do. And he heals them in the name of Jesus because of faith. But he still didn't give them any money because he didn't have any money to give them. Well, it's someone comes to the door and they're looking for something that I can't give them, and they don't believe in God. There isn't a lot I can do for them. And it's a real frustration for me, but it's a reality. And sometimes I have to say, there's nothing I can do for you. Well, I need this, that, and the other thing, but I don't have this, that, and the other thing to give to you, and you don't believe in God, so there's nothing I can do for you. And that is frustrating. But we look at this with the case of Ahaz, and he believes, and the other kingdoms are resting on their own strength, and the Lord is saying to them, no, you've got to believe. As crazy as this may sound, as totally overpowering this may sound, I assure you, the Lord is saying, if you trust in me, everything will be fine. And if you remember the story we were talking about just a couple of weeks ago, remember the story that Judah repented at this time. Assyria was on the march. Assyria was on its way to defeat Judah, and Judah repented. And what happened? All the soldiers of Sennacherib and of Assyria, they got sick and died, like overnight. And that was it. So who defeated them? It wasn't those four countries that came together that were defeated by Assyria. It was God. Okay, fine. You want to do that? Here is the disease you cannot fix, and all your men will be dead tonight. And I love the story that the general at the time wakes up to find out all his men were dead. And what did he do? He walked back to Assyria. He literally he must have taken a horse, walked back to Assyria because he had nothing, because he was defeated by the Lord. And this is what's going on here. The Lord is saying to Ahaz, do not, and through Isaiah, do not get involved in this alliance. They're all trusting in themselves. Instead, trust in me, and everything will work out. And that's exactly what happened. So it's kind of a fascinating reality. And again, it brings me back to what I say. When someone comes to the door and doesn't believe in God, there isn't much I can do for them. I need money. Well, I don't carry cash. I very rarely carry cash. And it really started with COVID. Well, even before that, I to tell you the truth, I didn't carry cash, and that was one of the reasons people always asking me for money, and I wasn't able to. I couldn't be constantly giving out money, so I stopped carrying cash. And I can help people on a more limited basis. But if someone comes to me and they don't believe in God, there's almost nothing I can do for them, because at least I can give them some kind of hope in God. But if they don't have that, then I can't give them any hope. And the last person I spoke to in that situation, he basically said, you don't understand what I need. No, you don't understand what you need. I can't do for you. No way. There's literally no way I can do for you. You need to be speaking to a social service agent. Well, they're not going to help me. Well, there's nothing I can do then, because I don't have the resources that you're looking for. We're going to be back on the other side of the break, listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We'll be right back. Have you ever wanted to read the Bible but didn't know which readings to check out? Well, how about looking at the Church's daily readings? You can find them at the website of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Just go to bible.usccb.org and click on the date that pops up on that page. There are other options on that page as well. That is bible.usccb.org, and click on the date and you will see the daily readings for your own prayer and study of the Bible. This is a prayerful tip from St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer, previews of upcoming podcasts, previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com, your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. Well, we were talking yesterday about levels of injustice that's a form of sin. And this is one of the things that I can get frustrated with when people focus on, I want to be careful what word I'm using here, but they focus on certain forms of morality. Okay, now I'm all for morality. But it was a story I heard today that I thought was really, really awful. And it was a homeless man who hadn't eaten in a while, and these teenagers, and this is not to say anything about teenagers, or maybe they were young adults. It doesn't say anything about young adults, because in either case, we know that there are a lot of this group that are good people that wouldn't be caught dead doing what I'm about to describe. And they looked at him, and they had a hamburger, and they said, well, you hungry? You want this hamburger? And he said, yes. And they took the hamburger and they threw it in the trash. That is... Now, let me put it this way. All these people talk about, well, there's mortal sin and, the whole bit, and people get all upset because the Pope said that there are worse sins than sexual sins. That is evil. And that is absolutely evil. That's obviously a mortal sin, but no one will talk about that. That's obviously a mortal sin. That is absolutely evil. And they'll celebrate it because obviously the man is homeless because he didn't work hard enough in his life. Oh, as the story goes, the man had some form of a mental illness, so he probably can't work, and that's something that people don't talk about. The people say these people have to start finding a job. Many of them are unable to get hired. That's true, either because of health reasons or maybe history reasons. Or whatever the case, people will not hire them. Sometimes they won't house them. We talked about that yesterday. And these are real issues that people deal with. And here you have these kids going, and that is absolutely evil to do that. And the person who was homeless himself, person said he only had a few bucks on him, but he went and bought the guy a hamburger. A homeless person bought the guy a hamburger because of what the non-homeless kids did to him, or young adults, or whatever they were, as the story was related to me. And maybe I'm being wrong by saying what I'm about to say, but I'm sure they were not homeless, and I'm sure they lived a lot more comfortably than any of the homeless people that they taunted. And, that is just so wrong. Now, it kind of reminds me when I was, remember, I'm a baby boomer. Back in my day, I mean, this whole thing where you have to have a seatbelt and you have to this and that. I mean, remember, when I was really young, they were trying to get people to put seatbelts in their cars as an option. It was an option. Cars didn't come with seatbelts. And I remember Danny Thomas, who was the star of the Danny Thomas Show, but he was also a major producer. He was he and, I forgot his name. He was working with someone else. Hopefully I'll remember his name later. He was actually the guy who played Nick in It's a Wonderful Life. The two of them formed a team, and they formed a company. It was called, I believe, either Thomas Leonard Productions or Lennox Thomas Production. It was Danny Thomas, and Sheldon Leonard was his name. And they were the number one TV producer of TV programs at the time on ABC, NBC, CBS. And they did the Andy Griffith Show. They did Dick Van Dyke Show, obviously the Danny Thomas Show. And so they were up there. They were number one. And Danny Thomas did an ad for what a good idea it was to put seatbelts in your car. So I come from that era. So among the things we did as kids, sometimes, I'm talking kids, we're teenagers, sometimes doing it alone, or sometimes doing it with friends, which was something that would never happen today. No parents would allow this today. We used to hitchhike. We used to hitchhike all the time. I used to hitchhike in Cape Cod during the summer when I had a job there as a caddy. And if we wanted to get into Hyannis, we had two options, either walk or thumb. And we thumbed to get to Hyannis. Cape Cod, I'm about 16 years old. I didn't have my license, 15, 16. And a bunch of us, we would thumb into, and we'd have to go separately, because if you have a group of kids thumbing, no one's going to pick them up. So you had to kind of do it. And that's what we did. Today, you tell a parent to allow their kids to thumb, and they'll be turned into, also known as hitchhiking, they'll be turned into the state. And that's the way we lived back then. So we kind of lived in that. But we had that experience where you'd be hitchhiking. And if you've never seen hitchhiking, it's really simple. You're hitchhiking, and a car would stop, and you'd run to the car, and they'd let you in. Well, you'd obviously have some other kids who were also driving. They had a license and stuff, and you'd be hitchhiking. They would stop, and they'd be waving at you to come, and you'd run, and just before you got to the car, they'd speed off. Well, of course, that was hitchhiking. That was different. But imagine doing that to the homeless, and, people doing that. And that is an absolutely horrendous sin. I can't think of anything more. It's just a horrendous sin. And that's one of the reasons why. And when I'm talking morality, I'm not saying that, for example, sexual sins are not sins. I'm not saying that. But people who focus on that all the time don't talk about things like that. That is literally the kind of evil that God condemns and says, don't be doing your sacrifices when you're doing that. Because you're doing your sacrifices and you're pulling a stunt like that, that is worse than that is as bad It's so bad, I'm not even listening to your sacrifices. I was talking to, I don't know if this is true, I just heard this tonight, that no longer in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts can someone in prison get a degree. What? I didn't know that. Now, I was doing prison ministry. I was helping out in prison ministry back in the time. My least favorite governor in all of the history of Massachusetts, and obviously I haven't lived through all of them, but I can mention his name. It's my opinion. He was the one governor that, well, there were actually two of them, one governor for whom I wouldn't vote for if God told me to vote for, and that was William Weld. And his lieutenant governor later became Governor Paul Cellucci. And I was telling him the story that in Southeastern Correctional Center in Bridgewater, they used to have this store that sold wooden things, wooden furniture, toys, all kinds of things that were made by the inmates in the Southeastern Correctional Center. And it was a great store. You could buy all these things for probably a little bit less, but they were handcrafted by the inmates and a great form of rehabilitation. The day William Weld took over as governor, that store left. It wasn't allowed because, remember, he campaigned on, I'm going to send prisoners to do nothing more to the school of breaking rocks. That was his whole campaign promise. And I remember I interviewed on WUMB-FM the corrections head of the Department of Corrections for the Dukakis administration. I can't remember if it was before or after Weld, because Dukakis was governor and then he wasn't, then he was governor again. It was actually back in the 80s, so that should tell us something. So I think it was before Weld took over. And I talked to him about these people who want to just send prisoners to do nothing more than break rocks. He says, people don't understand. The prisoners get out. They don't have life sentences. They get out. And if you treat them poorly while they're in prison, they're going to get out more bitter than they were when they went in. He says it's all about safety of the people, and that does not keep the people safe. Yet we have certain people in our politics that are all, yeah, that's the way you have to treat them. And that will destroy lives and make them more dangerous. And it all goes back to what is the just thing to do. And that's what we're called to do. We'll be right back. Did you know that Catholic TV offers free apps for both Android and iOS users? Visit the website catholictv.com or your app store to download this faith resource to your device. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. Well, tomorrow we're going to continue in Isaiah. We're going to be in Isaiah chapter 10. It is also the memorial of St. Bonaventure, Bishop and Doctor of the Church. St. Bonaventure, of course. You know, whenever I think of St. Bonaventure, I know this makes no religious sense whatsoever. I think of a hotel in downtown Los Angeles. I don't know if it's still there. But if you ever watched a lot of science fiction TV, they would always show that hotel because it had this kind of science fiction look upon it. Because remember, I used to live in California. And the St. Bonaventure Hotel. And here you are, this great holy man, and everything else. He was doctor of the church, the whole bit. And what do I think of? I think of a hotel that was on 1980s TV and 70s TV. And that's what I think of when I think of St. Bonaventure. But we'll talk about Isaiah tomorrow. Have yourself a blessed day.
You know the real is back. Father Carr Chaplain from the city of champions, dropping daily reflections coming straight from the field. The raw truth revealed for the strong-willed. It's the Greatest Act of Defiance podcast with your host Father Carr, a message built to last. The Greatest Act of Defiance podcast. That's right, the Greatest Act of Defiance. Word up. Word up. Word up. Word up.
The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.